Hi everyone. In this video we are going to discuss the single transferable voting system used in Ireland for national, local and European elections. Now, there are many different types of electoral systems used throughout the world, the majority of which fall into three broad categories: plurality or majority systems, mixed systems or proportional representation systems. In Ireland, we use a category of proportional representation called the single transferable vote, noting that this system is used by only the Republic of Ireland and Malta. Proportional representation simply means that a party gains seats in proportion to the number of votes cast for them. Now, we didn't always use proportional representation in Ireland. In fact, prior to 1918, we used a system called first past the post. But in or about 1920, we moved to proportional representation, with this system of voting being enshrined in the Constitution of the Irish Free State in 1922 and thereafter enshrined in the Constitution in 1937. Since proportional representation voting was introduced in Ireland, Fianna Fáil have initiated referendums on two separate occasions in 1959 and 1968, both of which were defeated, to try and revert back to the first past the post system. As I said, prior to 1918 we used a voting system called first past the post. But in the general election in December 1918, this system of voting resulted in Sinn Féin securing a large majority of seats, 69% to be exact, even though they only secured 46% of the vote. So, in an apparent attempt to stem the influence of Sinn Féin, the government passed the 1919 Local Government Act of Ireland to introduce the use of proportional representation, specifically the single transferable vote in local elections. It was hoped that the Local Government Act would stop Sinn Féin gaining seats out of proportion to their actual votes, as proportional representation allows for results to more closely reflect the way the electorate voted. And as I said earlier, in the 1918 general election, Sinn Féin, with only 46% of the vote, secured 69% of the seats. So, as I said, in Ireland we use the single transferable vote system of proportional representation, which simply means that you put the number one beside your favourite candidate, and then you can either stop voting or continue ranking some or all other candidates in order of your preference. To get elected, a candidate needs to reach a certain quota of votes, which is based on the number of seats available in the constituency and the number of votes cast. When you give more than one candidate a vote, you are instructing the person counting the votes that if your preferred candidate is eliminated because they haven't received enough votes, or elected with a surplus of votes because they've exceeded the quota, you want your vote to be transferred to your second choice candidate. So those candidates that you give your second, third, fourth and so on vote to, you are directly helping to get elected. So the question that many people want answered is whether you should only give a ranking to a certain number of candidates and leave the remaining ballot boxes blank, or whether you should give a number to every candidate. Now, the answer to this is not black and white as many people claim it to be and as many others would like it to be, because in my view, you are damned if you fill out the ballot paper in full and you are damned if you don't. To explain the different methods of voting, I'm going to use voting in the European elections in the Midlands Northwest constituency as an example. So in this constituency, there are 5 seats that need to be filled, with 27 candidates running in this constituency. The question that many people ask is whether you should give all 27 candidates a ranking. The first point to note is that regardless of whether you just give a vote to 1, 2 or 3 candidates, 5 seats must be filled. So if you do not at least rank 5 candidates, or the number of seats that must be filled in your constituency, other voters will be determining who fills those remaining seats. In my view, there are 2 methods of voting, which I will refer to as direct voting and indirect voting. So if you decide to give all 27 candidates a ranking, you are directly helping to decide who gets every seat, because as I said earlier, when you give more than one candidate a vote, you are instructing the person counting the votes that if your preferred candidate is eliminated or elected with a surplus of votes, you want your vote to be transferred to your second choice candidate and so on. So in giving a vote to every candidate, You are directly helping some people and parties that you do not want in power to get elected, and you do this by giving, say, Sinn Féin a higher ranking than Fine Gael or vice versa. The flip side to direct voting is what I referred to earlier as indirect voting. So if you decide that you only want to give, for example, 3 candidates out of 27 a ranking, while leaving the remaining ballot boxes blank, you are indirectly helping some people and parties that you do not want to get into power to get elected. The easiest way to understand this is, say you intend to give the Irish Freedom Party, Ireland First, the Irish People, Liberty Republic and the National Party your 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 preference votes and then stop voting. Because you are not giving a ranking to, say, some independent candidates, this could mean that you are indirectly helping the likes of Sinn Féin get into power, because Sinn Féin may secure more 6th, 7th and so on preference votes from other voters. And these votes will technically be used against the independents that you did not rank, simply because Sinn Féin will have secured more votes than them. So in not voting as far down the ballot paper as you possibly can, you will be indirectly helping some people and parties that you do not want to get into power to get elected. This is why I said earlier that you are damned if you do and you are damned if you don't. Because regardless of whether you fill out the ballot paper in full or not, you will be helping to put some people and parties in power that you don't want in power. And that's simply how our voting system works, I'm afraid. So for many people, whether they fill in the ballot paper in full or not will come down to a matter of principle. Personally, I will only vote right wing and transfer right wing, and I accept that in doing this, Sinn Féin may get in over Fine Gael or the Social Democrats may get in over Labour. The reason I am content to vote this way is because, for me, there is no lesser of two evils between Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Greens, People Before Profit, Social Democrats and Labour. In terms of Aontú, Independent Ireland and some independent candidates, I will reserve my judgment for those people and parties until my next video, where I intend to run through most of the alternative candidates that some people may consider to be right-wing or nationalist. The reason I'm singling out these 3 groups is because I don't do half measures. And if a party or candidate has what I consider to be a soft approach on immigration, hate speech, the erosion of fundamental freedoms, etc., I don't consider them to be the lesser of two evils, and they simply won't get my vote. And I will do everything I can to highlight where I consider this to be the case. Some people are willing to accept a lighter version of tyranny, and the way they communicate this is by voting for some of these apparent lesser of two evil people and parties. To be clear, I am not willing to accept any version of tyranny, and as I said earlier, I understand the consequences of voting this way, and I am prepared to accept the consequences. Now, to finish off this video, I just want to address a few other questions that people have asked. So 1. What is the final date to register your vote in the local and European elections? So for online registrations, the final date is the 20th of May 2024. 2. Can you bring your own pen to complete your ballot paper, as the polling station only supplies pencils? According to the Electoral Commission website, you can bring your own pen or pencil if you wish. However, if you use a pen and the ink smudges onto another part of the ballot paper, your entire ballot paper could be declared spoiled. So if you are using a pen, please be sure that the ink is fully dry before you fold your ballot paper over. 3. Can you still vote if you haven't received a polling card? Yes, you can, but you should bring a form of photo identification with you to the polling station. 4. If you only want to give votes to a limited number of candidates, can you put an X in the box beside the remaining candidates? So in researching this question, I located an article published by the Sun newspaper in 2017 that stated that the Electoral Commission had confirmed that the person counting the votes must accept any form of vote so long as it is clear who the person was choosing. So technically, if you were to include 1, 2, 3 and then X for the remaining candidates, the 1, 2, 3 candidates would be clear and your vote should be counted. That said, I could not locate the official guidelines confirming this, but what I did locate was guidance from the Electoral Commission website, which states the following. For each ballot paper, make sure you start with 1, then 2, then 3 and so on. To ensure your vote is counted, make sure you mark your preference as clearly as possible. If you do not want to fill out a preference for all candidates on the ballot paper, the box beside those you are not voting for must be left empty. Do not make any other mark on the ballot paper. If you do, your vote may be considered invalid or spoiled and not counted. So while my advice would be to err on the side of caution and include your 1, 2, 3 and so on preferences, do not include an X beside the remaining candidates. In this way, there can be no insinuation that your vote has been spoiled. That said, you are obviously free to include an X beside some candidates if you wish, and in all likelihood, provided you have given at least a first preference vote to one candidate, your vote should be accepted. And finally, question 5. What constitutes a spoiled vote? If the choice you are making when casting your vote is in any way unclear, this could spoil your vote, with some examples being the following: leaving the ballot paper blank, ticking candidates rather than ranking them, if the ballot does not have the number 1 or the word 1 beside any candidate, if you write your name on the ballot paper, or if the writing cannot be understood. That concludes this video, and I hope it was helpful. In my next video, I intend to give a rundown on the candidates standing in the European elections, and if I have time afterwards, I intend to look at the local election candidates. Thanks for listening.